Everybody. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the PatternFly community meeting. We host this meeting once every month, and it's really a great place to dive in a little bit deeper into topics that we want to cover with the community at large. So if you attend our demos, you see that oftentimes we're going through updates we've created, and this provides a little bit more context. So we will be covering things that happen both inside and outside our community and really encourage you to attend. Something that we are hoping is that you'll share this meeting out to others if you find it interesting or helpful, and be thinking of those who this may pertain to. So I'll be posting this on YouTube, and feel free to share it around. I'll be sending it out to the mailing list, and we're going to go ahead and jump in. So I'll share my screen. There. All right, can you see our title slide here? Yep, great. And it disappeared on me. So I'll go back. Okay. All right, we'll jump right in. We're gonna cover data-driven forms first. Martin's going to be presenting, and then Zach's going to go deeper into the PF site refactor, followed by the PF symbol library update by Gina and what's new. I will say that all of these topics really are pertinent to our community, and stay tuned because I think that you'll find, and if you don't mind muting your microphones, that would be great. Thank you. These will be really applicable across different things that you're working on. And finally, we'll cover what's coming up. All right, I'll pass it off to Martin.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear my voice and hope you can see my face.
We can, yes.
We can? That's great. So before we start, I would like to do some short introduction so that you know who is talking to. So my name is Martin Maroshi. I'm from Czech Republic, working for Red Hat for over 2.5 years. Currently speaking to you from Brno offices. So hello, everyone. If you never see me, if you ever heard my name, this is my face. And yeah, I've been just some technical background. I've been working a UI developer for I think like 5 years or 6 years. I don't really remember. I started working on Red Hat, as I said, almost 3 years ago as an intern. At that time, I was also studying at university and also working for a university. And then I kind of started working on the CloudForms project, and through that progressed, and now I'm working on the Cloud Services UI. If you want to do something personal, I love dogs, love mountain biking, love lasagna. If you want to know something more, just send me a message afterwards. So yeah, let's start. Hopefully you'll be able to see my screen in just a few seconds. Can I get some confirmation?
We can see it.
Great. So I've prepared today for you some short talk about something called data-driven forms. Some of you maybe heard about it. Some of you maybe even used it without noticing. So I would like to give you some very short overview, what it is, what it can do, and what it has to do with PatternFly. So just a short intro about the technical stuff, I guess. So data-driven forms is a library written in React. We are using it to render pieces of UIs, and specifically forms. We are using it, the forms are being rendered without anyone writing any code. You create something called a schema, JSON schema, and the form, the UI, will be rendered from that. This is not a presentation about the API we are using. We are using another library called FinalForm. which handles all the state updates, the validation, and all the other metadata that you might find in the form. If there are some developers, if you ever use Redux forms, it's very, very similar. So apart from the schema, there is another thing called component mapping, which basically decides how the form is going to look like, and that is where PatternFly comes in. And another reason why we actually wanted to have library like this is basically sharing the UI between multiple applications without very major changes in your code base. Also, it provides us the better way to test the code, to have it more stable, and to add some features and propagate those features all over our code base without going to every single file and just adding these. I will very, very quickly tell you something about the schema. So there's a lot of libraries who do this already. There are libraries who will allow you to render form using some GraphQL schema or even database tables. But the issue with these is that they were not made for UI. These schemas, these formats have been made for databases, for APIs, for your modeling and stuff like that. And the issue we had with this, like, how do you tell a database table that in UI it should be represented? Right? You don't. I mean, there is no way. And as I mentioned, I started working on CloudForms, and if you have some experience with CloudForms, you will know that a lot of these forms have some unique components, tables, wizards, some asynchronous validating input groups, what have you. And you just won't be able to do this with these libraries that already exist. So after a short research, we just went, okay, we are going to do it ourselves, and we will tailor it specifically for components and for frameworks that are using components like React. So on the right side, you can see a very, very short snippet of the component. Even if you never did some coding, as long as you can read English, you will definitely know what the hell is going on. So you can see that this piece represents some text field with label, there's name, some validation, and some other stuff. The one thing that I would like to point out that a lot of these other libraries will have predefined set of components, and they will restrict you to a predefined set of attributes. We don't do that. The customization is very, very important for us because we know that designers like you will oftentimes create some really, really cool UIs, but they will require some, unique components. So there are two parts of the schema, basically one part, and that is a mandatory part. You have to say what type of component you want to render, and you have to give it some name. So it will be registered in the form state under that name. But the rest of that schema is defined by the component API you are using. So if your textile component doesn't have label but title, you just change the label key to the title key and it's still going to work. So that's something about the schema. Another major part is something we call form renderer. That's basically just a rendering loop which takes the schema and renders UI. It also adds some metadata, some validation, and other stuff to all these components to make sure that they will be connected to the schema and everything to the form state, and everything will work as it should. By that I mean when you add validation, when you say the field is supposed to be required and the first letter is supposed to be uppercase, you will just specify that in the validation function and will take care of all of that. But the form renderer on its own doesn't really know what components or render or how they should look like. And we did this. For that, you have to create something called component mapper. And we did this for a lot of reasons. So let me just tell you something about component mappers. So it's exactly what it is. It basically maps the components from the schema to an actual components in the UI. So if you in your schema have field under the component type of text field, you have to provide a component mapper, which is an object where there is a key with a string of text field, and the value of it is the actual component. So what this allows us to do, we can have a great customizability around multiple applications and design systems. You can have one schema that can be rendered in 5 different applications, and all these applications will use different component and design systems. But all of these forms will work exactly the same. They will have the same validation, they will have the same names, etc., etc. Also, these component mappers are extensible. So if somebody just creates some crazy component, don't know what to call it, with some images and videos and whatever, it is not included in the official supported PatternFly mappers, but you can always add it in your application if you need it. You can also override existing components. If for some reason your label is supposed to be purple, you can just do that very, very easily. So I hope, so this is some very, very easy diagram how it, so as you can see, you provide a schema and mapper to your renderer. Before it starts rendering, it validates the schema. It makes sure that all the fields that you want are inside your component mapper. Then it goes through the rendering loop. It will add all the metadata, all the callbacks, everything you need, properly update your form state, and then we'll update. Then we'll create the UI. So I prepared some demos so you can actually see what I'm talking about. So hopefully you will be able to see all the stuff. So hope you can see this page on website. This is our official documentation page. It's not finished yet. I think it looks very cool. So I would like to showcase you the component mapping. So hopefully you can see this. This is a very simple form done using the Material UI design system. You can see there is some validation. When I choose this option, new fields appeared on the form. You know, this one is required. This one needs some website. So this is in Material UI, but you can imagine that in CloudForms we are using PatternFly free. We have this exact same form, and we don't write any code. So we just switch to PatternFly free mapper. Voila, we have a PatternFly free form which works exactly the same, has all the functionality it is before, and it's ready to be used. And then we just switch to PatternFly 4. And if in the future you will come up with PatternFly 5, we can just easily create PatternFly 5, and it will be compatible, and we can be using it. The main reason why we did this is mostly because of CloudForms. Like CloudForms right now is trying to use PatternFly free, and everybody wants it to be using PatternFly 4, but we've got a huge technical debt in our hands in other areas than just forms. But because of a lot of the UI is just forms, we started writing these forms using the data-driven forms. Oh, I'm saying forms a lot. Anyway, once the switch comes, we can just switch the component mapper, and all of the UI that is using PatternFly 4 will be converted to, which is using data-driven forms, will be converted to PatternFly 4 very, very easily with a minimal effort. And as an engineers, for us, that's extremely important, and it's going to save a lot of time because everything is going to be tested. Everything is going to work exactly as before. It's just going to have some different visuals. So I would like to switch here. Hopefully this is not going to be a bit too choppy. So what I showed you was fairly simple form. This recording is done from the sources UI in Cloud Services. It's been implemented by Richard. Some of you maybe know him. And this is a wizard that is fairly complex. There is a lot of logic, but very little of that logic is done actually in the code. Most of it is being defined in the form schema. You can see we've got a history. You can jump back or ahead. The steps are validated. I mean, if some field in the step has some errors, you won't be able to go to the next step, and etc., etc. Exactly how would you expect the wizard to work, but instead of writing the form yourself as a developer and all that logic living in your code base, the logic is extracted to the schema and it can be shared between multiple applications. So that is really, really cool. Another thing that I wanted to show you is this. We call this the data-driven form editor. This is something that David has created from the CloudForms team. And what it basically does, it allows you via some WYSIWYG editor and dragging and dropping to create a data-driven form schema. It's not been publicly available yet. It's not that finished. It's not finished yet, but we are going to be using soon. But why I'm showing this to you is because, I mean, you would expect it that we created some proprietary piece of software that handles this. So that is not true. This part on the left, that is actually a data-driven form, which is being used to create a data-driven form, which personally I think is very, very cool. And it shows you the possibilities you have and how much you can customize the form. Right? You can set some attributes to it, and you will see it change. So it's really cool, and big credit to David for creating this. And the last thing that I wanted to show you is how you can share these schemas and how you can leverage this in, for instance, a microservice environment. So here we have a catalog with some portfolios, and in portfolio you have an items which then you can order. Hopefully this won't crash on me. So I pressed an order, you can see some slow loading times, and then you can see this very, very simple form. Now, why I'm showing this to you is because the UI have no idea what kind of form is supposed to render. So before you see this form, you create an API call. It has a start to the portfolio item. It will return a schema, the data-driven form schema, and then you will render it, right? Why are we doing it this way? Well, we have no idea what kind of parameters you need to fill out before you order something, right? You can see there are some fields here, but when I switch to this portfolio, there are no fields there. You don't have to fill out anything to order this. And this is great because we are pulling this data directly from Ansible, so it doesn't even live in the cloud services. And you can share all of these schemas between multiple applications, multiple environments, without even having to write the code. You don't even have to know what kind of fields there are to be rendered. You just put the schema to your render, you put a component mapper based on your design system, and you're done. You've got a working UI, validations, and all that goodies that you would expect from some form libraries. So yeah, that's it from me. Hopefully this wasn't too long. I'm told there's being some Q&A session in the end. And yes, sorry. I was meant to show you, if you want to get in touch, we have obviously GitHub page called data-driven forums/React forums. We've got this documentation page called datadrivenforums.org. If you want to get in touch with me, my nickname on GitHub is hyperkit123. There is some email that I'm supposed to be using, I don't know, but it's better to just write me on Github, same nickname, or just write me an email. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Wow, those are truly the coolest tools. So thank you for sharing them with us. And we will have a Q&A session at the end for folks who have questions. All right, and I'll pass it off to Zach to go over the PF site refactor.
Hello. Should probably use this thing. All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Wonderful. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Hey, so I guess some of you still don't know me, so I'll introduce myself. I'm Zach. Do a lot of build and infrastructure things. So I wrote the CI for most PatternFly things, and I support developers, the workspace, and the docs for core and React repos. Somehow I'm the largest PatternFly React contributor by number of PRs. Not sure how that happened. I guess I did a lot of work. And part of the work that you'll probably use every day is I did the MDX docs refactor for React. So whenever you use patternfly-react.surge.sh, that's something I worked on. And I have a little presentation for you, and it's mostly reading at the beginning, so I'll be quiet and play the first few slides. All right. So we have 3 documentation sites. As you read, the last one needs some love. It's become kind of hard to maintain, and so we're trying to give it a new hope. That's what I've been saying. So some of the problems with it are that it hosts all of our docs, and it doesn't share configuration from any of them. So that's kind of this last point. It doesn't share many styles with the docs that are upstream. So this is a downstream project that pulls the documentation for our core HTML and React docs, but it doesn't share everything it should with them. And if you make a change upstream and next to React, you might not know what it looks like downstream. It also includes a few extra features that the others don't, that maybe they would want, like the full screen preview thumbnails. So we'd like to get everything consolidated and configured the same. So this is currently what it looks like. Hopefully this will stay mostly the same, but be unified in configuration. So I guess one example for this is we have a custom alert margin for this example that exists in org for both our core and React example, but then core and React, the alert will look different. It'll have different margins on our other doc sites. So this is one example of something maybe we want to be consistent in. So yeah, this is becoming difficult to maintain because it's not dry. It's also kind of become a behemoth of a ton of features we've thrown in, and it takes about 20 minutes to build, and it relies on a lot of hacky things that we'd rather not think about. So this is one example of a hacky thing, and I wrote this, so I'm to blame, but now I'm wanting to come back and fix it. So to create these snippets don't exist on our upstream core and React sites, but they exist downstream in org. And the way we got it to work is we had to go upstream and then inject some properties so that they get passed down to this documentation component, and then we can render the design snippet. But as you might imagine, this is kind of unmaintainable because now if someone goes and makes a new component, we can't write a design snippet for it unless they also do this prop injection thing, the docs. So this is what the core docs look like for a page. Yeah, so that's the problem. We have to go back upstream, and we're having to go back upstream more and more, and it costs time because we have to go upstream, we have to make the change, we have to make sure the change works in the docs upstream, and then we have to wait for it to get merged, and then we have to go downstream and fix it. And we have to do all of this usually in a release cycle or within a few days of testing for our release. And yeah, it's becoming expensive. And also, the upstream doc changes, they have unattended consequences downstream, and it relies on the configuration staying the same since we're just copying over the config. So if anything changes architecturally in the way the site's built or the way that where we render certain URLs and pages or how we render the URLs, lots of stuff will break because we make assumptions that it's the way it is and not going to change. So here's an example of something like that, which is for core and org currently, where we're doing this business where we string replace in JavaScript at runtime headers to add styles to them and to change H2s to H3s. And we also add a class to a table, which I don't think is that big a deal, but the changing H2s to H3s actually is a problem because then bugs like this happen, where sure, we changed it in core here. This is inside our core code. I know you can't see the context, but so this is for one half of our site. We have that version switcher. I'll go back and show. We have this version switcher in the upper left that you can switch between our core docs and our React docs. And those are two completely different contexts of the site rendered in completely different ways. So we wrote something like this for the core examples so that there wouldn't be H2s. but instead H3s, because we're styling our H2s to have these boxes around them. But then what happens is in React, the H2s look fine upstream. They're rendering like normal H2s, but then downstream, well, we didn't re-implement that same code for React. We only did it for core, so now we have H2s that have these long titles, and, well, the bullet points are gone. And I'm not sure where that problem is coming from, but we have styling issues like this because of that. So if we just use unified configuration upstream as well as downstream, then we wouldn't have this problem. It always looked the same, and when the person who wrote the docs in the top section here saw this, he'd know that it'd look exactly like that on org too. So Gatsby has a wonderful thing to do this called Gatsby themes that came out a few months ago, and so my plan was to start with Next, our core HTML, and then do React, and then make a new PatternFly org. Give it a new hope. So starting with core, this hosts our HTML, CSS docs. It uses handlebars, and it used these index.js barrel files, and that's where some of these issues were coming about, because we couldn't change. We would have to change core and React separately always. They would always have to be separate templates, because fundamentally they were using these index.js barrel files that are really just React files instead of using Markdown like React does. So this is what the code looked like for it, and we would have our core developers come and change this. And I just want to pause now and if you know React, you can probably look at this and find some problems with maintainability of having 100 of these for many components. We're using all these aliases, we're relying on the raw loader being aliased to raw, and we're importing Markdown using a Markdown loader that's going to be rendered differently than the Markdown from React, and it gets messy. So this is what the old core docs looked like. So on top of that, old core docs had completely different look and feel. Just from looking at the old core docs or making a PR to core to add a new component with new docs, you didn't know exactly how it was going to look in org when it came time to release org. So also, yeah, why should HTML devs have to know React? It'd be nice to have a lower barrier to entry. The Markdown content being outside the file, you can argue for, but we would have a lot of Markdown files in the same folder, and then we wouldn't know which ones are imported and which one's content's actually being shown. So it got messy there, and the import aliasing just really wasn't designed to be imported into org, and also there's inconsistencies in the URLs. Just ignoring the styling, even the URLs are capitalized versus not capitalized, so they're looking like the first components badge and next, and then they're looking like the second in org. So the solution is to convert them to MDX and use a shared template so that the core and React and then org will all use the same template for the examples. And also creating the shared example component so that the examples look consistent. And while we're at it, we can add a new feature that's been requested, and we've had problems with hosting on AWS, which is create full screen pages per example instead of creating a page where they're all components are rendered, and then we hide parts based on a query string on the URL of what example you want. So that's something else that we can do, since we'd be using the same MDX abstract syntax tree for both core and React. And we get all the styles good and none of the hacky stuff. And we could make the parts of the site that should look different, like the top and side nav. We can easily add that as a config option. Also stop using Sass, which is a problem on org because all the Sass gets compiled into one file, and you have Sass from React, core, and org that you don't know how it's going to work together, because sometimes CSS import order is important. I don't always know why and how, but I know sometimes it is important. And More important though is the class names, because we need to make sure that a class name in core that we use for an example or for the workspace isn't also used in React, because there are instances of this where we would name a class the same thing, or we would always apply a style to a certain selector, and then they intersect when we merge them together because we wrote the same selector. So instead, we prefix them now, and this helps us find design issues upstream to begin with, instead of downstream later when we discover our H2s are rendering funny. So this is what the new docs code looks like. If you're a React dev who's written docs, this looks familiar. Now the core docs look this way too. Markdown's been inline, so we use the same consistent renderer. It was a giant PR that came in last week. So this is what it now looks like, which is, I think, a lot better than what it used to look like and a lot more consistent with org, and still get to keep all the docs looking more or less the same. All the examples still work. So and then now doing the same thing with React, we really just needed to stop using Sass and use prefixed selectors, and then we needed to change the H2s to using this title thing so that we wouldn't get this same H2 issue, or so that we could include H2s in like possibly our design documentation or in other MDX files that we import, and have them be rendered like normal H2s instead of with that box. So this was the change that needed to be made. And also we wanted to support code sandbox. So we needed to always have an example name or a class example name inside of our component, so that for the code sandbox, we have to give it the name of a component to render. So we give code sandbox the example code, and we use a regex to grab one of these two things. Otherwise, we wouldn't know what. So that PR also got in last week. So this is what the old React docs looked like, and what they now look like. Some of the styling's not perfect, the margins are off, but at least is consistent with what org looks like. It will be consistent. Now when we create a change to change margins or any styles at all in the theme, it'll apply to core and React, which is wonderful, and that's the bigger purpose of this. So yeah, now we have the consistent look and feel, we have our consistent examples, we have our cleaner CSS, we don't have Sass anymore, and our code is dry. And it's also easier to develop. So with the theme workspace that we've set up, we can run all 3 sites at once, and we can build org in 8 minutes, which is a lot less than 20 to 25. And we also get a few new features. We get the per page full screen links, or the per example, sorry, I should say per example full screen links, which would be good for accessibility testing. So now we can say, hey, your specific example doesn't comply to some spec. And we also get the code sandbox links, which I know people were starting to create and share around anyway, but now we support them, and we give you a link for any example on our site. And that's on top of now having maintainable JavaScript and styling. So I did make mistakes when doing this for core. That was the giant PR, which is I designed for a good website and not for a good developer experience, which is always a hard balance. So yeah, I messed up and stopped development for 2 days because I had it set up to import the npm package of our core CSS instead of using the locally built version. So I had to spend some time fixing that. And here you can see all the mistakes I fixed that I caused. So it's not over yet. We still have to finish refactoring PatternFly org. There's a lot of sections that need to be added, and the workspace can use even more work by having PR previews for the 3 sites, so that when we make a change to the theme, we know how it's going to look across all 3 sites. And also so it will automatically open PRs upstream in our upstream repos to bump the version of the theme that we're using when we release a new theme. So here are all the relevant repos, and yeah, that's what I've been up to for the past few weeks.
Thanks so much, Zach, for sharing. And I'll pass it off to Gina, who's going to update us on the PatternFly design kit.
Hey everybody, I'm going to share my screen. Hard to follow up after that amazing intro, Zach. But so for those of you who don't know me, I am an interaction designer, and I'm working on, myself and a group of others worked on the PatternFly design kit, which includes some sketch files that you can download, and it includes a library, a symbol library, and a template file. And the links that I provided here will link you to both of those, and we host them on Sketch Cloud, so that allows for you to get automatic updates whenever we have to update based on the code. But just some background of what the design kit is. It's something for designers to use to create consistent and accurate designs when using PatternFly. So we have just released the new font, the Red Hat font, into PatternFly, and it's an opt-in feature, I believe it still is. So we now have two different design kits, one with the Overpass font and one with the Red Hat font. And they're both up to date with the most recent packages and code and releases. So for the library, we tried to mimic all of the current components that are offered in PatternFly, and I can demo a little bit of how you would use those, but basically we use those symbols to create a template, which is supposed to kind of mimic a demo that's in the code. So for example, we would use these pieces of the accordion to build the actual accordion, and then that allows you to just go in to the template file and steal this artboard, and then you can customize it and edit it as you'd like. And all of those actions are performed. You can either double click on the text and edit it from there, or they're up on the right panel. And the cool part about it is that they're responsive as well. So we incorporated some of the padding and the spacers that are used in the code, and we put those in the symbols too, so that when you create a longer line of text in there, you can expand the symbol to adjust for that. And then so I'll show some other templates, but the about modal is what I had on that screen. And we supply for this new, the new font template, we have these examples with the padding showing. And the reason for that is that for the pages that we create, we can't supply you with all the variations that you're going to need when you're designing. So we decided to supply all the padding up front in one artboard, so that if you did need to change something, you can at least use that padding and know what it is. And I want to say that's all. But so, like I said before, the links to download the symbol library and template are provided there. And then if you also were to go to the patternfly.org website and click on Get Started and Design, there's a lot more information that goes into depth of what the sketch library is, like the layers and the actual pieces within it. But as a general update, we have created both of those libraries now, so one with the Overpass and one with the Red Hat font, and they're distinguished by the name. So the PatternFly for Overpass is what the Overpass one is called, and then just PatternFly is the new Red Hat one, Red Hat font one. And yeah, it's going well, and if there are any bugs or issues that you find with it, you can file them at the GitHub repository that we have for it, which is actually listed on that page for the Get Started information. That's all I got.
Great, thank you, Gina. All right, so that covers our topics for today, and now we're going to talk a little bit about what's new in PatternFly, in case you've been following along. So first, Evan's going to cover the overflow component.
Thanks, Rachel. Let's see here. Great, and can you see the overflow menu on my screen there?
We can.
Awesome, great. Well, for anyone who hasn't met me yet, my name's Evan. I've been a developer here at Red Hat for just about 2 months now, and helping out on some of the React components. And I guess in my free time, when I'm not building out overflow menus, I've kind of been a young Luke to Zach's Obi-Wan, basically pitching in on trying to get the doc site over to the Gatsby theme. Wish I could take any credit for that presentation, but I think he's got everyone beat here today, so I'm just going to dive right into the overflow menu. So this is a new component. You can see right at the top here, it is currently experimental, so we're still kind of fine-tuning some things and open to any feedback that you have there. But the general idea of this component is essentially if you have a menu that you want to expose to a user at a certain width, but collapse into kind of a horizontal, or excuse me, a vertical drop-down past a certain breakpoint, that's kind of what this is used to control. And we've got a few different examples here that I'll walk through today. Just a quick, simple example, some with a couple different groups, one with what we call the additional options that collapses some of those, and then persistent options, which will keep the options visible even after the rest of them collapse. So I think jumping right into a quick demo here, this is the kind of simple overflow menu. So you can see we've just got 5 items listed. You can think of kind of a horizontal menu here, and I've got them set to resize just below 992 pixels. So if I go ahead and size my screen down, you'll see the menu disappears, and in its place we get this kind of kebab drop down. So that's where the overflow kind of kicks in. So it's really just built around that breakpoint. You can do the same thing with different types of groups here in the menu. So this is the same idea, just replacing simple text with some of these buttons that we have here and different icons. But we do have some different options to kind of let you customize it a little bit more than just showing or hiding everything. So you can add additional options, which basically lets you reveal that kebab above the breakpoint that you have set, and put anything that you don't want to show by default in there as a dropdown. So you can see we've got the buttons and icons listed here, but then I've indicated, go ahead and show that kebab at all times. And if we are above our breakpoint, just put that last action in there. And then if we size down, again, they'll all get squeezed down into that drop-down menu. So that's kind of an example of showing one of the options hidden at full screen width. We've got the opposite as well. So if you mark something as persistent, so in this example, I've set the primary button as persistent, and we do still have the additional options. So we've still got this here. But if we size it down, because that's set as persistent, you'll see below our breakpoint, it continues to show. Everything else has been moved into that overflow menu, but the primary button still does show there. So that's kind of how you can use the overflow menu. Again, we've got it up on the site now. Those examples all live on the documentation sites there. So yeah, feel free to let us know if you have any feedback or start picking around. Again, it is experimental, so I know we're still making some small changes, but yeah, excited to get that out in the world. Thanks, Rachel.
Great, thanks, Evan. And Nicole's going to cover our latest updates to the data toolbar.
Yes. So we've been building up a new experimental data toolbar component. It's a flexible layout system. So at its simplest, it's basically just a layout for laying out items in a toolbar. It's built to accommodate a variety of configurations and is a responsive and basically updated version of the current toolbar component, which is not as responsive. So, and basically this toolbar can include any PatternFly components, but it also, as you hand it different types of components, it lays them out according to PatternFly design specifications. As it has an optional filter feature, which when used displays applied filters in chip groups according to design specifications as well. So you can see that in the documentation working around here. So you don't have to use this version of filters with your toolbar. A lot of the components that involve similar behavior can be put into a toolbar, but if you would like to use the toolbar that displays applied filters and handles clearing them and handles them responsively, so in the responsive state, it collapses some of these applied filters down and displays them in a drop-down appropriately. That will all come for free with this toolbar, this updated toolbar. Demos and a Katacoda tutorial are coming soon to show how to pair a data toolbar and its filtering feature with tables. But since the toolbar, this toolbar overall is still an experimental component, there is a thread on the PatternFly forum where we're asking for any feedback on this component. So we would love if anyone interested in using this in their products would start playing with this component and seeing if it has any issues or meets all of their needs. Please let us know so that hopefully it can be a fully supported component before too long. But that is, yeah, that's the data toolbar as it stands right now.
Great, thank you. And Katie's going to share compact pagination.
All right, Katie here. I'm gonna share my screen once I find it. All right, here we go. So I just want to cover quickly the compact variation, well, not variation, it's a flag we've added to pagination. So you can see here, this is on our documentation website. You can see the normal pagination. You've got your items, lists, your go to first page, previous page, current page you're on, next page, and last page. But that's very long. You can see that takes up half of this bar right now. So what we've added is a compact flag that you can just set in the code very easily. Just a flag, just say add this, and it becomes compact. The current page and page tracking up here gets removed. You can see it's just down to the page forward and page back, and you can control the items per page. So this is for if you're maybe doing a responsive layout, you can set this flag when the screen size reaches a certain length, or you can just use it as a kind of compacted variation if you don't want to have a very obtrusive pagination. So it gives you a couple more options there, and it's more cleaner. So, but it's available for you to use currently. It's already up there.
Great, thanks so much, Katie.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and I will share what's coming up. All right. Can you see my GitHub, my milestone that I'm on? Okay, I got a thumbs up. That's good. All right, so the page that I'm on currently is our 2019-09 milestone. And I really encourage you all to check out our milestones. This is linked on the slides on the What's New slide. And this is really great for seeing what we're working on right now and what will be coming up. So to touch on what will be coming up, this milestone, we are introducing new updates to Data Toolbar and also fixing a few bugs. And we're going to be introducing a divider feature and bulk select to table. And then we're also going to be introducing many fixes and enhancements to charts. And that's just to touch on a few things. So I really encourage you to dive into our milestones and take a look at what's on our roadmap there. And to show you a little bit about what that view looks like, This is where our milestones live, and that is linked in our slides. So I'll stop there, and I want to make sure I have plenty of time for questions. But are there any questions for our group?
Rachel, did you want to just review our upcoming code freeze and let people know when that is and when we're expecting the release?
Sure, yeah. So let's see here. Great. Okay, so what our schedule looks like for code freeze is we will start slowly closing the repos on October 24th. So we'll close the core code, the core repo first, and then we will then close the React repo the next day. And that gives us enough time for testing and promotion, and we'll release on the website on October 29th. So be on the lookout for these updates coming on October 29th. So that is the release schedule for this upcoming release.
Thanks, Rachel.
Problem. Any other questions? I'm loving all the enthusiasm in the chat. I think that was it for our questions today. You can, of course, find us on Slack or on the forum. So get in touch, and we'll talk with you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks.